Hey everybody, this is gonna be a response to Truthbetold7. He recently made a video responding to a video that I made a couple of months ago. I was talking about how he is falling again, and it seems like he even took that out of context because he thought that was about the toll houses. Actually, that was about a certain tradition about the Athonite monks that they were practicing. That in response to that, I said that he was falling again, and by falling again, by the way, I did not mean apostatizing from the faith. So he's making a lot of assumptions in there. I'll just play the video and respond to it as we go along.
Individual who made a video about me some time ago. I've been intending to respond in claimed that this individual claimed that I have fallen from orthodoxy again. The reason he said again, and I want to emphasize,
I didn't really say fallen from orthodoxy. Falling again. You can watch that video under falling again. Truth be told is falling again. So I didn't really say from orthodoxy. I was saying that he is, meaning in the state of falling. Because you don't have to be an outright heretic. That's not what I meant here at all. It's like, for example, when you become less conservative and less conservative. You are yet orthodox, but you're starting to move away from orthodoxy. That's the sense in which I meant it. So he uh, misunderstood that apparently.
says that word again, is because according to him, I fell from orthodoxy when I rejected the toll houses. Let me give you some.
That was not the context of it. I was talking about the skulls that the Athonite monks, you can watch the video, that they were preserved. Yes, I was also upset because of the toll houses, of course, but that video was specifically made, and you can see this on my channel. It's against a tradition at Mount Athos where they preserve the skulls of the saints.
Background about the toll houses. The vast majority of my Orthodox life, I accepted the toll houses, but I went through a brief period when I rejected them.
And you have to ask yourself why. Why did you reject them during that brief period? Obviously, isn't it an influence of modernism? Isn't it Lazar Pohalu, who we know, has other problems, which I don't want to get into right now? Right? And then I believe another Michael Askul, who I believe is a schismatic, old calendarist, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, and these are the two people that mainly argued against them, and the Batch of the Soul clearly exposes all of that. So obviously, this is a modern phenomenon. People don't want to have the fear of God in their hearts anymore, right? They don't want to take that away. Well, I mean, what does the devil want else, right? To take the fear of God away from people. And if you take the toll houses away, but a great aspect, a great deal of that particular judgment gets taken away. People just have the easy way out, right? Almost like Protestantism. And I said almost. Does anybody mistake that?
But after reading the book, The Departure of the Soul, my belief in the toll houses was restored. However, I still have some doubts and questions about the toll houses. So according to this person, I fell from orthodoxy when I rejected.
Not from orthodoxy. In a state of falling. Okay. Meaning becoming more and more agnostic about things, because I know this is how it starts. Okay, one rejects one element, right, within orthodoxy. Slowly and gradually, one starts to deviate from the necessary essentials as well, and then one is, of course, completely fallen.
The toll houses. So what he's done here is he raised to the level of required belief a peripheral item, and by doing
no, that's not even what I did. Number one, that's not what I did in regards to the toll houses. Number two, I think Truthbetold has a basic misunderstanding of how essentials really, or what we need to believe really works in orthodoxy, because he may be of the belief that only the things, and many may have that misunderstanding, only the things that are dogmatically defined in ecumenical council are essential. Well, think about this for a moment. If that were the case, then does that mean that in the first 300 years the church was allowed to reject the Trinity? because the scriptures are not explicit about the Trinity, right? Those exact words, homoousios, the same essence as the Father. So if somebody believed in modalism, let's say, Sabellianism, would that be acceptable until the Council of Nicaea? Well, not really. One could argue, well, maybe God would not have held a person that accountable after it was as if after once it was dogmatically defined at the Council of Nicaea. But still, since it was taught by the church everywhere universally and inbuilt into the liturgy, you would still be expected to believe that, right? Pretty much essential, if not very close, right? Nobody can argue against that, really, right? So I would argue the same would apply here as well, because if something is inbuilt into the liturgy everywhere, you see that, you recognize that, well, that you're going against the truth of God. Now, obviously, allow God to do the judgment, and I'm not going to declare anybody officially a heretic, of course, because that is for the church to decide anyways. The church has to depose the person before he is, being excommunicated in a formal way, right? So, but yeah, I didn't even say that, right, for the toll houses, that he is, an outright heretic because he, doubted the toll houses, but in a state of, and not because of the toll houses in this instance, but because of the rejecting the Ephraim monks' tradition of the relic preservation, that he seems to be falling away. He is in a state of falling.
So that makes him a heretic for adding to the faith.
Not at all.
The toll
Just
houses
explain that.
are not a universally held dogma of the Orthodox Church.
Universally held belief. What do you mean by dogma? Not everything is dogmatically defined in Orthodoxy. Like I just told you, for the first 300 years, wasn't dogmatic. The Trinity wasn't dogmatically defined. So
a lot of people believed in the toll houses, but it's not a universally required tradition and dogma. It's
it's inbuilt into the liturgy everywhere. So what really is there left to? One would basically have to be living in denial.
Blessed Augustine said, I forgot what he said. Let me look real quick. In essentials, unity, non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity, end quote.
Right, so, and this is very charitable to remind people that the toll houses is inbuilt into the liturgy universally, right?
I have the right as an Orthodox Christian to reject the toll houses if I so choose. Because
I'm not sure about that, although I myself didn't argue about that, but I can't really say that you have the right to deny them. Because if something is built universally in the liturgy, I would be very careful to deny them. I'm not going to call you or anyone a heretic for denying that. But from what I've known, what I know so far, I'd be very careful in denying something that is right in your face, right? In the liturgy. It's a very dangerous thing. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to call such a person a brother in Christ just because he has doubts or denies the toll houses. No. But I would still do my best to tell the person, well, it's universally built into the liturgies, right? And I get a very bad feeling for people who claim to be Orthodox and they deny the toll houses. This is not something. You see, when it comes to the book of Enoch, for example, are the sons of God the sons of Seth, or are they the sons of God, the angels that came upon the daughters of men? Yeah, that I would call a peripheral doctrine. Okay. This one I don't really see as a peripheral doctrine, right? Just because it hasn't been defined in ecumenical council, because you don't need an ecumenical council to define something which is already universally accepted by the church. And if this is universally found everywhere in the church, right, and only as a modern phenomenon, all of a sudden people are starting to say, oh, God forbid, this is a Gnostic doctrine, this and that. What does it tell you? Well, that tells you it was once, it is universally accepted. It's only these modernistic individuals, following after Michael Haskell and Lazar Pahalu, that don't want to accept it.
Not a dogma of the Orthodox Church. Now, another thing here is that this person says that I've fallen from Orthodoxy again. The reason why he says again is because some time ago I made a video criticizing a custom on Mount Athos where
now he's coming
dig
to that.
up deceased monks, apparently cut their heads off and put their skulls in a room. And the reason why I criticize that practice is because in the Old Testament, in the book of Numbers, God told the Jews not to touch the dead or they would be unclean for
Right, and you took that out of context. I explained all of that. Please, guys, watch that video.
7 days. And another reason I have a problem with this practice, and I don't remember if I mentioned this.
And by the way, that's a very Protestant attitude, to explain, to understand the scripture by yourself and not going by the church fathers, right? That's exactly what the Protestants do. Well, what is this other than a Protestant attitude, a Protestant approach to the scriptures? Looking superficially at the verse and letting your own desire get the better of you and read that into it, right?
Another reason I don't like this practice is because I think it's disrespectful to the temple.
See, I think, well, who are you? I'm sorry you have to say this, but who are you to think that this is discipline? There are many things in the Old Testament that a normal human being, I told you, would find absurd. Are we to reject that too? Right? I mean, this is complete nonsense. For example, bronze serpent, looking at the bronze serpent, something that is completely ludicrous. That's idolatry. Why did you look to God in your heart? What's a bronze serpent got to do with healing? It's completely ludicrous. And I explained all of that as well.
Spirit, which the body is. So I don't know how these monks justify this practice.
There you go.
I'd like to hear what kind of argument they can give in support of this practice.
I have given it in my video.
Now, this is another example of this individual raising a peripheral item to the level of required belief.
I didn't say you're a heretic because of that. I just said you're in a state of falling because one leads to the other. If such an important practice that is practiced all over the world by Orthodox monks is all of a sudden denied by somebody, then that shows there's something seriously wrong. And that's why I argued you're in a state of falling. It doesn't mean you're yet fallen. You can still return. But you seem to be very volatile and very prone to Protestantism, in my opinion.
The attitude of faith, therefore, and consequently is a heretic. Orthodoxy claims
completely misunderstood what I said.
The apostolic faith. I want to know which apostles said that in order to be an Orthodox Christian, you must accept this practice on Mount Athos. Okay?
I'm not saying you must accept it. You go along with what is being practiced. Okay? If something is being practiced continuously, you don't rebel against that. That is not the Orthodox approach. Okay? You're acting like a Protestant. You're protesting an existing practice. What is that? Is that not Protestantism? Literally, that is Protestantism, what you're doing. Okay? No, who are you? Yeah, you can insult a father, a monk. If a monk who at least has that much experience as those monks who are carrying out their practice, the same years of ascetic life, or if they are divinized fathers, and then they tell you that this is something wrong with it, that's a different story. But who are you is the question. Okay? To go to the monks who have separated themselves from the world, are practicing ascetic lives day in and day out, and then here you come and tell them, oh, you're wrong. What kind of nonsense is that? That is Protestantism. Okay? That's what it is. I don't think there's any way around it.
Now, perhaps unbeknownst to a lot of people is the fact that in the pre-schism church, the Latin Christians only accepted 50 of the apostolic canons, and yet they were considered Orthodox Christians, and the Eastern Church did not separate from them. So if they can reject 35 apostolic canons and still be considered Orthodox Christians, then what does that say about someone rejecting that local custom on Mount Athos? Also,
who said they rejected the canons as such? Canons, even today in Orthodoxy, we have Orthodox churches that accept for Maccabees, and we don't have that in the canon. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we reject that. That just means we don't put that in the canon. Just because something isn't put in the canon just means that it's not primary. Okay, see, this is another misunderstanding. Doesn't mean that I necessarily reject it. For example, the Book of Enoch is not in canon. It doesn't mean necessarily it's rejected, right? Right. And it could later on be put in the canon if decided at an ecumenical council. It becomes formal. And so it doesn't necessarily follow. It could be, but it doesn't have to follow from it.
Unbeknownst to a lot of people is the fact that the bodily assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
And by the way, it also depends who does the rejection. Is it a common guy who doesn't even have 1 week of ascetic practice? Or again, is it somebody who has 7 years of ascetic practice and then says, right, this, it doesn't seem like this is a practice and that has not been universally accepted. It's not universally accepted. That's a totally different story, right? Totally different argument. All these things need to be taken into consideration.
Is optional in Orthodoxy. I accept it, but my point here is that you're not required to believe in it as an Orthodox Christian. Now, it also recently came to my attention, or maybe I should say also it recently came to my attention, sorry, I'm a perfectionist. It recently came to my attention that according to one Orthodox philosopher and one Orthodox theologian, we're not even required to believe in St. Gregory Palamas's energy essence distinction in God theology.
Okay. Let me reverse. Let me hear that again.
One Orthodox theologian.
According to one Orthodox theologian, who? Please name the name. I want to hear the name.
We're not even required to believe in.
See, this is how ludicrous one Orthodox could be. Now, I'm not going to accuse him or anything, right, until I find out the name. But I want to know who that theologian is.
St. Gregory Palamas's energy essence distinction.
I think at this point, guys, you should check out Jay Dyer's YouTube channel. The energy essence distinction is what really separates us from the Roman Catholics. So if you argue that we are not, that is not something significantly important for us to accept it, well then, God forbid, people might say that you might just become Catholic then. That's how important it is. Saint Gregory Palamas, as far as I know, is even a divinized elder. How on earth can you say that we are not, supposed to believe that? When that runs, that's basically, I see that as the heart of orthodoxy, the energy essence distinction. If you don't make that, you fall into the same trap of Roman Catholicism.
In God theology. I don't know if that's true because it was countered by another Orthodox theologian. Another Orthodox theologian told me that he believes it is required belief because of the council's vindicating.
So there you go.
Palamas in the 14th century, and the fact that Saint Gregory is mentioned in a service during Great Lent or something along those lines. Okay, so I'm not sure who's authentically representing the Orthodox perspective at this point, but I do want to mention that according to one Orthodox philosopher and one Orthodox theologian, both of whom are authors, we're not required to accept St. Gregory Palamas's energy essence distinction in God theology. So there are things in Orthodoxy that you are not required to.
Here's a general rule. When you see two conflicting theologians, you look into the background of those theologians. You see, is one theologian living in the modern era? Is he influenced by modernism? How much ascetic life does he practice? If he has like say we have a theologian, but he drives a Mercedes car, he's part of the world and all that, well, then I already would be skeptical. If I see a theologian who's basically separated from the world, he's practiced ascetic life, right, for many, many years, well, okay, then I can start taking him seriously. You need to do a background check on the theologians as well, right? If two theologians, like you say, are conflicting on a certain matter, especially in these times, we have to be very careful with someone who claims to be a theologian.
To believe, for example, those old calendarist zealots who claim, and not by.
Isn't Michael Askool, isn't he a old calendarist who claims to be against the toll houses? I don't want to be mistaken here, but that's from what I recall from my memory, that he happens to be one of the old calendarists.
By the way, not all old calendarists hold this view, but there are some within the old calendarist movement who actually believe that grace departed from the Orthodox Church just because they changed the calendar. So
yeah, and we don't agree with that. That's not universally held by the church. Okay, so what's the point?
They raised the calendar,
but still, it was false to have a new calendar, right? You're not going to tell me that was okay, right? You're not going to tell me that that's optimum, right? You're not going to tell me that it's not better if we went back to the old calendar, right?
The level of required belief, and by doing so, that makes them heretics because they added to the faith a non-apostolic concept. None of the apostles said anything about the necessity of keeping the calendar. They did not teach that.
Well, you can argue, if you want to argue that way, with those explicit words, you can argue, well, none of the apostles ever said that God is three persons in one essence. in those exact words. So then what? And I'm going to deny the Trinity now? No, that's definitely not the method. The methodology that he's using here is problematic. Not necessarily when it comes to the calendar, but overall, that way to argue is wrong.
The
It's
calendar
not how
had
we argue.
anything to do with their charisma, with the apostolic charisma. Okay, so what these zealous, maybe I should say overzealous old calendars have done, as I stated, is that they raised this non-essential item to the level of required belief. They made it a dogma, it seems. The idea that God would remove grace from the church just because a non-essential item was removed is ridiculous, and it's heretical. They're heretics for adding to the faith. Now, changing the calendar would be uncanonical and an attack on the sacred tradition of orthodoxy, but it's not required. I want to emphasize that that people need to understand that orthodoxy claims to be the apostolic faith. None of the apostles ever said that the calendar had anything to do with the Christian gospel. So these are examples of people raising to the level of required belief non-essential items, peripheral items, and by doing so, that has made them heretics.
Okay, I hope I just explained why I did not call him a heretic. I did not mean the word fallen in the sense that he's like fallen from the faith completely. He's in a state of, because he's starting to protest certain traditions. And that's how it starts. And yes, if I'm talking to a new calendarist who insists that the new calendar is just as holy and wholesome, right, and there's no problem with it, yeah, then I would also might argue that he's in a state of falling. Okay, and that it may not be long before he gives into other things. The next thing, he would be an evolutionist, and he would deny, the Earth being young, which was decided by the fathers of the, I believe, the fifth or sixth ecumenical council. That the Earth is not billions of years old, but 7.5, approximately 7,500 years old, and so on and so forth. You see, all of these things, unfortunately, have been forgotten by many of my Orthodox brothers and sisters today. They can be easily trapped into the world, and eventually they will leave the essentials, and they will become either outright agnostic atheist or some form of Protestants. And that is the danger. That's why I'm warning him. I'm not gonna refuse to call him a brother anyways, before even if he says something that I may say is outright heretical, because that is for the church to decide, to excommunicate him. So let me make that very clear, truth be told. As long as your church doesn't excommunicate you, well, I can still call you a brother in Christ. But I can have a personal opinion that you are very likely in a state of, falling. I hope and pray that you'll come back completely, that you'll be solid, that you'll be conservative, right? And yeah, may God guide you, and may you be able, enable you to endure to the very end. Same for all of us, especially in these times, because we're living in very dangerous times. Take care.